Hey guys, welcome to the Purpose Podcast. I am just so excited about what we're going to talk about today and the guest that we have. I know Rachel's not here. Some of you guys are having a hard time staying here just because Rachel's not here. It's okay. It's okay. I promise. I have some guests that'll pick up the slack. But just want to remind you, want you to not just to subscribe. I believe this will be one of the most shareable episodes we've ever done because of our guest. And so make sure you subscribe, you prepare to share, and wherever you're listening. And so this is going to be an incredible opportunity. Just a reminder, the Purpose Podcast, we believe that you have a purpose, and that purpose is to win the world. And we have all these things around us that can either propel that purpose towards win the world, or it can squash that purpose to win the world. And I would say what we're going to talk about today is one of the things that is most squashing the purpose people have, whether that's from intentional or unintentional. And so I've got some friends here from Parent Protect, which we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. Actually, Brock, would you take a second and just tell us before we talk about who you are personally, just to get people bought into what we're going to talk about? Can you tell us a little bit about what Parent Protect is?
Absolutely. No, thank you for having us. And so Parent Protect really began after we started being reached out to by parents and educators and administrators with questions that they had about technology. And we really quickly realized that there was kind of that disconnect between what people kind of hope they knew about the platforms that our kids today are surrounded by, that we're all surrounded by, and what they can actually be used for, or who they might be talking with, or what type of content we all can be so easily exposed to. And so Parent Protect kind of began out of that realization, really with the mission of what can we do to empower families to be more active and aware in what their kids are doing online and what we all are doing online. I'm going to
Right.
go back to a lot. And so that's kind of where we've started.
Awesome. Parent Protect helps us not just be aware of what's going on online, but it's not just you guys aren't the Amish. You guys aren't saying, hey, let's just turn off the internet and hide from it, which I'm super grateful for. I think that's awesome. So again, that's the route we're going today. So whether I know it's called Parent Protect, but whether you have kids or not, like this is going to be beneficial for all of us today. You're going to get stuff. I'm just excited about it. But before we get into that, Josh, you're on here as well. Could you guys just tell us a little about who you are and what's brought you to the place of leading at Parent Protect?
Yeah, thanks, Pastor Zach. My background is in social media strategy, working with brands, companies, ministries, just trying to tell their story online, trying to reach more people. And the more time I've spent living in this world of social media, specifically YouTube, but social media as a whole, the more I've realized, number one, how addictive these platforms are, how
Right.
easy it is to just waste time on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, what have you, but also how all of these platforms have profit models that are built on getting us to look, getting our attention and then maintaining our attention and seeing how long they keep our attention. And that applies for our kids too. So the more time I've spent in this world, the more I've become aware of it. That's what brought me to Parent Protect. And my wife is also she's a teacher, so she's with 7 and 8 year olds. She's been in third and second grade classrooms, but even just hearing the stories of things that she's encountered from 7 and 8 year olds already, of the tech that they're on, the things they're seeing, the people they're interacting with online, all of that. That's kind of our heart and what has made what brought me here.
Yeah, and you and Brock met. I mean, you just said it offhanded. You said that you guys met at the White House before Brock tells us a little about his background. How did you guys meet at the White House?
Yeah, good question. I always thought I was going into news, so I've always been really interested in politics and media, and so did a lot of work in politics that in the past, internships and things, and that's what led me to meet Brock. So I don't think I want to get back into the political world, but if Parent Protect's one of the only things that comes out of that season, I call it a dub. So I'm happy with that.
That's awesome. I would say for a lot of people are listening, they're not on YouTube, so they're not seeing it. And if me and Brock were going to do the news, we would be more on the radio side. But I'm looking at Josh. His smile's so white, he's a handsome guy. I could see that. I could see you being an anchor or something.
And remember, I paid you $50, so it's 3 mentions during the podcast for that.
You're welcome. I've got the smile checked off. I've got the glass. Okay, yeah. So Brock, tell us a little bit about what brought you to starting Parent Protect, and all. I know you've been a lot of places. So kind of take us on that journey that brought you to this passion point.
Yes, sir. So I grew up on a ranch. So I've got an agriculture background. Ended up going to Texas A&M for college, and so unfortunately the Tennessee Volunteers knocked us out of the College World Series.
Sorry about that.
I know. Still a little bitter, but and then kind of went off on the political realm. Spent some time on Capitol Hill, and then at the White House, as we mentioned. Kind of got a little bit tired of the polarization that DC, shockingly. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, exactly. But your next stop was just as polarizing.
Yes. So from there, went to work at SpaceX and got a lot of time with Elon and learned a lot from that team, and then came to Parent Protect and really felt called as we talked to more families, talked to more schools on how big of an issue the tech realm can be, and Joshua and I both feel like tech it brings so much opportunity, and we love tech, but it's kind of that unbridled access that can create the realm of some darkness that we want to help fight against.
Yeah. No, that's 100%. I just want to point out, like, just for everybody listening, you guys both had things that you were doing, and you guys saw a need. And you guys went after it to meet it. And so I think that's huge when we're just, again, talking about our purpose to win the world. You guys are great examples of that. And so, again, obviously there's 1,000 ways that we could go as we talk about technology and social media and things like that. But before we get into some of these equipping things, I actually wanted just to jump off some of the things y'all mentioned. And so, Josh, you mentioned your wife is a teacher, and so has 7 and 8-year-olds. And so I think sometimes people, because maybe some may consider the biggest issue with social media and technology is just the waste of time, just the fact that, people are on screens. Last time I looked, on average, 7 to 9 hours a day, right, which is significant. But what are some of if you could just help us build a little urgency, what are some of the challenges? Obviously, you guys are looking at research and studying, but as you have that and the anecdotal, stories of 7 and 8-year-olds, what would you say are the top 1 or 2 things that really build some urgency of the negative impacts of whether it be social media or just technology, unbridled technology access?
I think there's a framework that can help think about this. There's been this book come out this year, and I'll get to the anecdotal part too. But Jonathan Haidt, NYU social psychologist, he's written this book, The Anxious Generation, and it's been on the New York Times bestseller list for many weeks. But he highlights these 4 foundational harms. And as we talk with parents, as we talk with administrators, I think a lot of the stories come back to these. And it's of the effect of tech. It's addiction, it's social deprivation, sleep deprivation, and then attention fragmentation. And we could just go down the list. Addiction, like you mentioned the 7 to 9 hours of screen time. The amount of time that we're spending on our devices and disconnected physically, but isolated on our devices is skyrocketing. And we have some of the best teams in tech that are building these algorithms to reel us in. I think of a story of a high school, now college student in Long Island who was really into very athletic and got on Instagram for the first time as a young teen and started with like athletic type accounts and things that were getting recommended to her quickly led to her getting even recommended like uh, eating disorder type content,
Right.
even accounts like one being Skin and Bones, that she was recommended as a young teen, but from this algorithm. And she was so reeled in, so hooked, and this led her down a very dark path. But that's just one example. I mean, we could go down the. When I think about sleep deprivation, recently we were talking with an administrator in at a school in Texas, and she was talking about how she spent 30 years in education, and she said, I never expected that one of the biggest problems I'd be facing today would be how to keep our students awake and engaged. Because she's
Wow.
like, they stay up so late on their devices, video games, what have you. They come to school, and we're trying to compete with these uber engaging, bright flashing, dopamine filled
Right.
devices. Um, I mean, that's just a couple. But Brock, I know you have just as many, if not more, to add.
Yeah, because Brock, you said part of your inspiration, or to do this was schools that issues were having, and so I know that Josh just mentioned one, but are there any more issues that were being elevated to you, or from schools or families around unbridled access?
Oh, totally. And a few of the stats that I rush to, are kids who spend 3 or more hours per day on social media face double the risk of depression and anxiety. Um, the amount of sextortion cases that are happening across the U.S. and across the world right now, and that we're able to respond and assist with, is mind-boggling.
What? Sorry, can I stop you, Brock? You said sextortion. Would that be? I don't think I've heard that word. Is that sex trafficking?
So sextortion really is where uh, uh, the most recent case that we've been helping with was a girl in Texas. Um, Someone found her public facing Instagram account, took those public facing images, ran them through an image generator to cause them to be nude images,
No
and then
way.
yeah, and then they messaged her saying, "You need to pay me money or do XYZ, or we're gonna release these to all your families and friends." And so that's the type of thing that we're seeing a ton of now.
You see, so that's getting more prevalent,
Totally.
bro. Oh my gosh, and that could just go on just because you're posting pictures of yourself.
Yes. These image generators that some folks have built, any picture you
Yeah.
could they could upload and push out any nude image of any one of us.
Man, what? Yeah, that's brutal.
And even it's
Yes.
not limited to AI either. I mean, we've heard many stories of um, the families, students. A lot of times, these predators are targeting like teen boys, and they'll pretend to be, have a fake account of a young, attractive girl and reach out to these guys via DMs, try to build a relationship, try to get them to send a nude image, and then they'll hold it over their heads like, hey, I'm going to ruin your reputation. I'm going to send this to your school, your family, if you don't give me X amount of money. And I mean, even the FBI, I think the number over the past 3 years, they had like over 13,000 reports that they investigated. And so, I mean, if they pointed out that many, that means there's probably way more. But yeah, we're hearing a lot of that.
Well, I was asking those questions so that I could just encourage the people listening, whether even if you don't have, 'cause I know there's even some personal friends of mine that don't have kids or their kids are older who are listening to this. And when I said that everybody listening, if you needed inspiration to pray for kids and students, and you need more than what you just heard, then just rewind it and freaking listen to that again. That's unreal. And so just the world that that they're growing up in, that we're in, that's hard to wrap your head around. So just again, not just the takeaway of these two men of God who are, they've leveraged the gifts that God gave them to impact the kingdom and to win the world, but also just the burden that I would say I was burdened for kids and students before this conversation, but that just hoisted up radically. So again, just praying for kids and students in this, man, it's crazy. And then something else you said, Brock, that I don't want to be skipped over, because that was what a polarizing, even the word sextortion, obviously I'd never even heard of it, so kids are people. And correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe that stat is not limited to, I doubt that it's limited to teens, but people that are on their phones or social media for 3+ hours a day are double as likely to be anxious and depressed. Is that right?
That is.
And that's not uncommon.
No, and what I'd say is the power of the algorithm today that all of these social media platforms have built is feeding that number and impacting all of us, because there's an article, I think Washington Post article, that came out a while back saying the TikTok algorithm can find your deepest desires. And so the study showed that within minutes of being on the platform,
Wow.
it can kind of detect what type of content you like to watch, how long you sit on a video, do you interact with it? And the really scary thing is, when we're talking about the mental health crisis, is that these algorithms are able to detect, hey, this girl is feeling sad, and so we're going to continue pushing these sad, downcast videos to her, and then that snowballs into kind of the content that Joshua mentioned earlier. And I mean, this is how they're being built to operate, and to, like Joshua also said, to capture more time, capture more clicks, capture that interaction that then gives them more money.
Bro, that is so brutal. I wrote something down earlier that you actually just so validate. I want to come back to it here in a second. But, and again, you guys have forgotten more than most of us know around this stuff, because what you do, I'm aware at probably a pretty rudimentary level around algorithms now, and I was going to ask you to explain it, but let's make it a little more anecdotal, a little more like real life. Because I would say most people listening are believers, like they want to make an impact. And so, we hear a girl is sad. If we had control over the content, we're going to push something encouraging. And if we were running a business, we would almost even think, hey, like, we want to cause encouragement. But you're saying that they're going to push things that will continue the spiral. Is that because obviously their P&L, their profit and loss, it would be engagement, staying on. And so from their perspective, if they could push more either sadness or division, if people are feeling divisive, then they're going to get more engagement for a longer period of time. So it behooves them to, especially if it's a negative emotion, to increase. Am I understanding that right?
That's it. And they certainly would highlight how they've set up barriers and safeguards, and many of them have. But at the end of the day, I mean, you're exactly right. These companies, many of them are public companies. They're worried about shareholders. They're worried about the bottom line. And the profit model that they all have is based on our attention, because the longer we stare at a screen, the more ads we see, the more ads they can show us, the more money they can make. It's as simple as that.
Wow. Wow. Well, you said something earlier, Brock, about how it can, which this is, you said it was scary. I couldn't agree more, that it can detect your deepest desires. And I'm reading a book right now called Deep Change. It's really good for me. Like, it's taken me, it's like some real deep work. And it's making me ask some questions around, like, what are my deep desires? And I know, and I actually pulled off of all social media. Like, there's some people we meet together, and then they'll post all that stuff, and just so I don't have it, because like, I know one of my deepest desires is to be seen, to be loved, and I love to work out, all that kind of stuff. And I definitely saw how social media leveraged my desire to be seen and known, along with my affinity for exercise. And I was addicted to porn growing up, and so like that again, like it was those fitness accounts, and then like, it just that's actually why I don't have it on my phone, not just for the attention purposes, but also the holiness purposes. And so the thought, like, whenever you said that it can leverage your deep desires, like that social media is going to leverage because the desires that God gave us aren't wrong. They're just supposed to be satisfied in Him, whereas we're satisfying them in social media. And literally, they would call it maybe retention or attention on their profit loss sheet, but we know like that we're satisfying our deepest desires in social media. It's just a wild connection. I mean, that is so deep.
It is, yeah, and I'd say too, that's one of the conversations that we like to have with families on, is just like, be aware of the type of content that there can be on these platforms if you decide to let your children be on them. Because another stat I wanted to bring up was, there's a Common Sense Media study that said that the average age that kids today are exposed to pornography was 12 years old. I think in our conversations, we're seeing it's closer to 8 years old.
That's
today.
what I heard.
But how do we, unfortunately, and it's heartbreaking to say, but it's not as much of a question of, if it's going to happen. It's kind of, when is it going to happen? And so what is that reaction of your child going to be? Are they going to come to you and tell you about it, and you're going to work through it as a team? Or are they going to kind of feel embarrassed and not know where to turn, and then let that fester into an addiction, and let that fester into larger problems as they get married, and kind of from there too? And so
good about what you're saying there, Brock, because you don't have a defeatist mindset. Just say, well, they're going to look at porn, like just accept it. Like, obviously, you guys would throw yourself in front of a bus for that not to happen for your kid or somebody else's, but we believe in that too. Like the principle of the first, like we get to start these, and just to bring some levity to a pretty challenging conversation. We actually say if they're 8, it's too late. So like we want to have these conversations, and so like Rachel had a conversation with about sex with Rachel with JL, who's now 10, but right there she's probably 7 or something, and then we're at the dinner table. And one of our sons were acting up, and I asked them if they needed a spanking, and they said no, but Mom needs a spanking. And I said, does Mom need a spanking? And they said, yes, sir. And I said, okay, when y'all go to bed, I'll give Mom a spanking. And JL is probably 8, and she said, are y'all talking about sex? And which I didn't even know that Rachel and her had that conversation. And I about like, so, which we're intentional about, is still my stomach just wadded up. But like when somebody brings something like that up, she will have a context, that like this kid, in the wherever they're having this conversation doesn't get to set the narrative. And so I love that. We're in agreement around that. And again, we say we're passionate about equipping Christ followers. We have to equip our kids. And so I think that's great, because the question was, what are some of the skills to navigate in this world? So again, talk to us about the pyramid.
I think And even before we get to that, I think some of the most foundational things is like, where's our identity rooted? So it's like
Yeah.
what you're talking about with social media. Who are we looking to uh, for validation, and having that foundation in Christ before we go on social media and are hyper obsessed with how many likes and follows and engagements we're getting. Um, and also, just another note before we jump into the pyramid, I think another thing that we've seen reap real benefits is just talking to kids and students openly and honestly about the reality of the challenges that we're seeing on tech, the
Right.
impact it's having on their brain, on their attention span. Yeah, I mean the list goes on. Um, we see students respond really well when we can, help them understand the why behind what we're doing. And really, when Brock mentions the pyramid, that's the way we like to think about responding. It's like the food pyramid, in the sense of what's at the bottom we think is the most foundational. We go up from there. It's three R's, easy to remember, but we think first off it's relationships, and that can be as simple as, hey, when your kids encounter something that feels off online, do they know who they can go to? And even for parents, this could be like, hey, are you getting in those tech environments with your kids, that those platforms they're on, those games they love, whatever it is, are
Yeah.
you aware? Are you trying to learn about not only that environment, that thing they love, but why do they love it? What makes them tick? I think that can be, just so foundational. And also, when we think about relationships, how can parents build community around the tech that their kids love? Because very easily, devices, social media, it's easy to use it, consume it in isolation.
Right.
And so our focus is like, hey, how can you get around a community that is pursuing that, enjoying that in a healthy and sustainable way? That's the first R. The second R is resources. This can be as simple as, a lot of students don't realize all the reporting mechanisms that exist on video games, on social media. If you see someone bullying, or if you see something explicit, violent, whatever it is, you can take action to report that person, to block that account. We talked about sextortion earlier. And one thing that I think haunted both Brock and I was that one particular student who was facing the issue of someone creating those AI generated nudes with her images. Uh, it it took a while for Meta to actually flag and block that account, because she reported the entire account, when later we found out in talking with people at Meta that she should have reported the exact instance of that person sharing those pictures. And so, just making sure students know about all those systems to help them. And the last R is restrictions. And we don't start with that. We end with that, because we
That's
think
good.
if you bubble wrap your kids, that's not the way to win. That when it comes to tech, I mean, certainly we think the more you can delay introducing smartphones and social media, there's a lot of research in the space to back up the later the better. Um, but this looks like restrictions on devices. It looks like restrictions on platforms, but also like even in a home, the location of where the devices are being used. Are they in bedrooms? If
Yeah.
they are in bedrooms, we recommend pull them out of the bedroom before your kids go to bed.
Yeah.
I think so many of the stories that we hear of students getting involved with junk, seeing stuff parents wouldn't want them seeing, interacting with people they wouldn't want them interacting with, a lot of it's rooted in when students have access to a device apart from other people, usually late at night, many times in a dark room. And that's
Yes.
largely preventable. Um, and then the last thing I'd add on that is just thinking about, when it comes to screen time too, how we like to think about screen. Not all screen time is bad. We like to think about active screen time and passive screen time. Passive is where I'm just binging TikTok, Netflix. I'm just consuming content, which isn't always bad. But there's certainly, once you reach that binging point, or once it's been a while, I think the negatives outweigh the positives. But
Sure.
we focus on how can you minimize that passive screen time, and really focus on, if your student's going to be on tech, are they learning? Are they building? Are they engaging with other people? And so we have different things we recommend, on just weighing those two and capturing that. But Brock, how to do with the pyramid? Anything you'd add there?
That was beautiful, and I think I just want to emphasize like the community standpoint
Yeah.
and how important it is, um, and how thankful we are for like Faith Promise in in putting a spotlight on this issue and the resources and all the good that technology brings, but also making sure that people are aware of the bad, the ugly, and what actions they can take to minimize those. But how important it is, and we've seen in schools in Houston of families banding together to say we're not gonna get all our kids smartphones until they hit eighth grade or after eighth grade, or kind of banded together to make this decision across the board rather than having that peer pressure factor, changing the conversation and causing some difficulty.
Yeah, that's so good. Some of the things again, I love the pyramid, relationships, resource, restriction. I think that's so good. I did something that you said I wanted to point out is, 'cause I think it's easy to say, just to draw the line and say like no social media or no video games, but most people aren't going to draw that line. First of all, because it may not be the right decision, and most people just aren't, just because they're they really acquiesce to what their kids or student wants because for whatever reason. But something that you said, Josh, I think is so powerful is if you're going to make the decision to let them get into it, then I wrote it down. You get in there. You get in there. And so, like if one of my friends, one of the best dads I know, his son loves Fortnite. So he plays Fortnite, like and instead, which this is a wild deal. I mean, his son is 12, and that's a time where kids are starting to distance from their parents. Like his friends are asking, "Is your dad getting on? Is your dad like that?" Changes the conversation, and they want him to, And so I love, which I know not everybody's personalities not the same way, but I would say that like our kids. The intentionality with our kids' interaction with the internet gets like it gets our what's left over. I give my best at work, and when I get home, it's just like, well, dang, if I could just put them on Fortnite for an hour, I could just sit here and whatever. I love to get in there. I think that's great. If you're going to let them get in there, then you get in there. And again, like there really are. I wrote down mental health and some questions around that, but just for time purposes, and something else you said, Josh, I think is worth mentioning is understand the why. And so I do think that we just skip straight to restrictions, and we've been guilty of that even in our home a little bit. But understanding the why around relationships, resources, and before restrictions, I think it's wise. I think it's just good. I really enjoyed that. And so let's talk specifically about Parent Protect. So talk to us. Give us the like. I wouldn't think that anybody wouldn't be listening to what we've talked about so far, and they're not leaning in. Hey, how can I do this? What resources do you? How can you equip me? And so, what does Parent Protect provide so that all this can become a reality, a healthy reality in homes?
Yes, and I feel like a lot of the audience probably is listening right now thinking, where in the world do I begin? And
Right.
the alarms are going off, and so um, that's exactly where we like to step in. And so what we've been able to build is we've got a team of families and tech experts, counselors, teachers that have helped us build this on-demand platform, really unpacking technology and making it easy to understand what these platforms are, how to navigate them, what parental controls they have access to, um, kind of give a good, bad, ugly summary of the platform. And then one of my favorite parts is conversation starters that we give to families on where to even begin talking about Snapchat, talking about TikTok, talking about uh, Roblox, and kind of
Hmm.
unpacking and answering every question that families have, but also meeting families where they are on the tech journey, where we can go a 30,000 foot view or we can get into the granular details.
So, like Brock's saying, in that library, parents can come in and there's a wide array of videos on various social media, AI, streaming platforms, mobile devices. The list goes on. A couple of them, even as you were talking about the why, Pastor Zach, I thought of. We did a sit down with a brain researcher, and she outlines years of research that she's done looking at the developing brain and how tech impacts it. And we've had such good responses from those videos. Those are available. That just kind of where she's breaking down, hey, here's what's going on up here, and here's why when your students see porn, if we remove all other reasoning from it and we just look at the brain, here's the effect it has on them. And I
Yeah.
think for students, they've been really receptive to some of that. And like Brock mentions, we have like a help series. This is for parents when they maybe the top questions we get: my child saw porn, my child just met a stranger online, my child wants a smartphone. Just kind of are like, hey, when you're in that moment of emergency, here's some practical next steps.
Yeah.
So those are all the resources for families. We also have curriculum for teachers, for and videos where we're talking directly to students and teaching the basic concepts of what does it look like to just be a good citizen online. How do you differentiate fact from fiction?
Yeah.
What's an appropriate amount of information to share? I mean, lots of these questions that you think, I mean, for us, like, I mean, Brock and I are probably part of this first generation that's really grown up with these devices. And we've just kind of figured it out as we've gone. But it's like now we have some of the best practices of like, hey, here's what you can look for and be aware of when you're in these online environments.
Yeah. And I
What
love, oh, go ahead, Brock.
Well, and I just add one more thing, that one of the biggest areas when it comes to our conversations with students is on digital footprint. Like what you post today, you might think disappears or was so long ago that people forget, um, but it could impact your college application or your dream job or whatever it might be. And so making people realize that what they post today could come back and haunt them when they go for these future ambitious goals.
We 100% look at people's social media before we hire them, no question. And so but I love something you were saying there, Josh, that, the parent protect can be, it can be, responsive. So like my kids saw porn, like we're reacting there, like, and we need help. But it's also like preparatory in, hey, if you have like a 3 or 4 year old and it's just cocoa melon, then you can be like, okay, here's like what are the conversations we're gonna have at 4 and 5, like in preparation. And I just want to encourage people because we're buying subscriptions for people at Faith Promise who come and are a part of what Parent Protect is doing, and we're actually going to try to get it in as many schools as we are around, so that we can be a part of this solution and equipping kids, students, families to be all that they can be. But I just want to encourage people who are listening that aren't a part of Faith Promise. Like this stuff is super quality. This isn't like a church bulletin thing that's just kind of scrounged up. It's not just text or anything like that. Like this is high quality, data driven, passion driven, scripture driven. And so I really believe, we believe in what you're doing, or else we wouldn't partner together. And so guys, and Brock or Josh, if somebody wants to go look at it, it's parentprotect.com. And then if I'm not mistaken, is like a $5 a month per subscription? Is that right?
Yes. So parentprotect.com, and then anyone can sign up for $4.99 a month. But then we love working with school districts and churches like Faith Promise to make it available at no cost to some families as well.
Yeah, and so which we're passionate about, and we're going to do it. But just in case this is shared outside, and hey, guys, actually do this for me as people are sharing this, maybe with other pastors or leaders or school, people in administration. How would someone like that reach out to Parent Protect and partner with you?
Yeah, so anyone can reach out to team@parentprotect.com, or we have a contact us page on our website. And also we love to hear from families and love to support families if they're going through some really tough tech challenges, like the sextortion case that we mentioned earlier. And so we'd welcome anyone listening, if they need help or have questions about tech, to utilize that as a way to connect with us, and we'd love to support in that matter too.
Perfect. Well, guys, it's been super enlightening, super challenging. I just pray, like we'll have in the show notes some of the stats that were mentioned and the pyramid and stuff like that. Obviously, Parent Protect. I also have to read it myself now. I've heard about the anxious generation a bunch of times. I'm just going to have to read that, look at those 4 foundational harms, and just so we can be more prepared to equip everybody that walks around us to win their world. So, guys, we love you. Love doing ministry with you, winning the world with you, and we're so grateful for what you're doing. So y'all have a great day. Guys, remember, we all have a purpose, this to win the world, and so let's go out and do it this week. We'll see you soon.